What is up, everybody? Welcome into the YouTube live show here tonight. I am John Kurtz. If you are new to the channel, I do talk Big 12 and college football here each and every week. And today, man, I'm excited about the show today because the coaching carousel continues to turn. We have some coaching carousel updates that involve Matt Campbell and Luke Fickell, both directly and indirectly. And I think if you're a fan of Iowa State or Cincinnati, you'll be very happy by the recent developments in the coaching carousel in college football. And honestly, if you're a fan of the new Big 12, you should probably be pretty happy about that because it could lead to further strengthening the league when it does come to fruition in its new form. We also have some college football playoff to talk about with the latest rankings that have been released because they are very kind right now to the new look Big 12. I mean, I don't think if you would have told me back at the beginning of the season when all this started that the Big 12 would be in this position here heading into the final college football playoff rankings, I would have believed you that the Big 12 could be sitting here with 4 of the top 13 in the playoff rankings just before the final week of the regular season, right? That is crazy, and the Big 12 is looking very, very good, and I, at this point, just have to wonder, will we ever get some sort of apology from all of those that tried to float that narrative out there that the Big 12 just would not be able to compete with the Pac-12 or the ACC. But beyond that, there is a playoff scenario, a legitimate college football playoff scenario that involves 2 different teams from the new look Big 12. Yes, 2 different teams from the new look Big 12, and it's not some kind of crazy scenario where 25 different things need to happen. I think that is very exciting if you're a fan of the new Big 12. The coaching carousel, let's see, I'm going down my rundown here. We have news on James Franklin. We have news on Mel Tucker that directly or indirectly ties into the fate of Luke Fickell and Matt Campbell and therefore Iowa State and Cincinnati. We've got news that would further suggest Sonny Dykes is going to be the guy at TCU, which everything was already headed there, but we're seeing more and more evidence of that with what is coming out today. Also, we've got to go through the final week of Big 12 games here today and look at what is happening. The Big 12 championship game scenarios, what could be best for Oklahoma State, what is going to happen in Bedlam. This is, I feel like, in a way, almost overshadowed, and maybe I am just wrong here because I'm not in the state of Oklahoma or thinking about this right now, but it feels like the coaching news has somewhat overshadowed this. But Bedlam, the ramifications, I think, of Bedlam with Oklahoma State being in position to make the playoff, a better position than their rival, Oklahoma, to make the playoff, have probably taken a little bit of the steam out of this, at least to me, more steam than it should have. Because I think I'll make the point this way. If it were Oklahoma that were playing for a spot in the playoff, there would be more national conversation about it. Whereas Oklahoma, I suppose, could be playing for a spot in the playoff, but it's Oklahoma State that has the more realistic chance there. And I think it's going to be fascinating to break down that game. But remember how excited we were when conference realignment first happened and when Texas and Oklahoma first announced that they were leaving. That is the game. Like, this is the game everybody had circled on their calendars. What is it going to be like in Boone Pickens Stadium when Oklahoma rolls in there having said, see ya, we're out, peace, Audi 5000, you guys deal with whatever this conference is going to be that is left. And now you have it with Oklahoma State having the shot to go to the college football playoff if they win. Man, that is going to be lit. No shame in my game in saying that. That is going to be lit. An awesome atmosphere and an awesome game for Oklahoma State and Oklahoma coming up this weekend. So there is your rundown of what is coming up on the show here tonight. I will remind everybody that you can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something if you would like to, 1, support me and what I do here on this channel, and 2, get your question or comment up to the top so that you make sure that I do see it. I will continue to monitor everything else that's happening in the chat, but if you want to make sure that your question or comment gets up there at the top, that is how you do it, by donating below. So appreciate everybody that's here. I'm anticipating that tonight it'll probably be a little bit lighter. I understand, like Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, a lot of people hanging with the family tonight. I would imagine many people will have to catch this on the replay, but totally okay with that. In fact, I am very much so looking forward to a 4-day weekend here and just chilling as soon as I am done here. But I didn't want to leave you hanging without a live show. And beyond that, it's like we have to get to everything that's happening right now. The coaching carousel, there was a lot of news on that front here today, plus everything happening with the playoff in Bedlam. there is just so much going on right now in Big 12 world. So let's get to it. I'm going to try and scroll through some of the comments here just to get us going. Larry, what's up, Larry? I see Larry saying hello from San Diego. Jealous of that, Larry. San Diego, my favorite city, I would say, in the United States. Yes, Nathan, here is the jawline. Top 5% jawline in the state of Kansas. So says Twitter. ISU 5-0 in basketball. Last in the Big 12, beats number 3 in the Big East. Yeah, Iowa State was taking it to Xavier, I believe, right? Shout out to the Clones, man. It's been a tough week for my Cats, losing a couple games in Kansas City to Illinois and Arkansas. Yes, Wayne Jones, the transfer portal. He is transferring. K-State got some transfer news. We're going to see a lot of that. That's another thing that's going to come up here in college football that probably we'll try and do here on this channel is track all of the transfer portal stuff, which is going to start happening now. You're going to have guys that aren't going to want to play this week, certainly not in the bowl games. So that's going to get pretty hot and heavy, fast and furious. But let me start with the playoff rankings. Before I get into the coaching stuff, well, you guys want the coaching stuff first, right? That's probably more interesting here. I'm thinking about the non-live audience as well. I think people want the coaching stuff. So we will get to the coaching stuff here right away to try and pay off the T's as quickly as I possibly can. Here is what has tangibly happened today. What is or since the last live show. Let me state it like that. What has tangibly happened since the last live show? One of those things is that James Franklin has signed an extension at Penn State. I think a lot of what happened there is that James Franklin probably was feeling things out and realizing that the fact that he is a 500 Big Ten coach over the last 4 years was not doing enough for the USC, Florida, LSUs of the world to make him some kind of legitimate bona fide candidate there, and came back to Penn State looking for an extension and more money and trying to go back to what he has there. And that's not entirely shocking. I actually think James Franklin would have fit in best at Florida. I know this isn't really Big 12 related. I think he would have fit in best at Florida because they clearly were unhappy with Dan Mullen's recruiting and just a lack of a will to recruit, a want to recruit. I think that would have been the best fit there, but apparently that's not going to happen because Franklin has signed on with an extension at Penn State. So that is big news because of the domino effect there. Also, I will tack onto this. I saw literally on my phone right before I came on tonight to do this live show that Mel Tucker has agreed to an extension at Michigan State. Now, that was rumored before the Ohio State game, and then obviously they just got the doors blown off of them by Ohio State, but I still did expect eventually Mel Tucker would sign that. But that takes another candidate off the board for jobs like LSU, where Tucker was mentioned there for a moment, and that probably did cool, to be honest, with his performance against Ohio State. And nobody seems to know exactly what's happening with the LSU coaching search at the moment, too. So who knows how legitimate of a candidate he ever really was there. But those two things have really big repercussions and potential reverberations in the Big 12 world here, because those are a couple of jobs that Matt Campbell and Luke Fickell presumably would have had some interest in, Penn State and Michigan State. Certainly, I think the Penn State job. And I would imagine that is for both. But I consistently see from anybody associated with Cincinnati that for Fickell, it would be like, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Penn State, the jobs that he would be legitimately interested in. That was one of the jobs. And I credit to Cincinnati fans that have hung out here on this channel, in this chat for a long time. Like, I can remember you guys all saying that same thing. Like, we aren't worried about USC, which was the first major job to open, and that sparked some of the Fickell conversation way back when at the beginning of the season. But it was always like, we're worried about Penn State. We are worried about what happens if the Penn State job opens, and then Luke Fickell wants to go there. Fickell has a big family. He has a wife that the word would not want to go out to USC, even though the USC AD used to be Fickell's AD. There were questions about how well he actually got along with him. So there were a lot of things that made USC a little bit tricky. But for a long time, I mean, the first month and a half of the season, it seemed like most people assumed James Franklin was going to be the lead candidate at USC, was probably going to take that job. And then, bam, one of the premier Midwest jobs is open. And so you have both Fickell and Campbell, Midwest guys who would be looking for an elite kind of Midwest job to make the jump to eventually at some stage in their careers. That opens up a lot of possibility there. Not going to happen right now, at least for this year. It is not going to happen. And I see in the chat, Wolf58, an Ohio State fan, I believe, if I'm correct. And what's up, Wolf? Penn State is doomed to another decade of mediocrity under Franklin, worst in-game play caller in the Big Ten. Yeah, I mean, look, Franklin's a recruiter. That's the deal, and that's why I thought he made way more sense at Florida than anywhere else, because they seem to need the recruiting help the most right now, and then kind of figure out some of the other stuff later. Whereas Dan Mullen, I think, is the total inverse, right, of James Franklin, where the recruiting's not going to be quite as strong. But I do think he's a very good offensive coach and a pretty good in-game coach. But things have really come off the rails there. But, man, that is huge news for Cincinnati. I mean, just think about the way things have broken here lately for Cincinnati. Oregon gets absolutely smashed last week by Utah. So, they're losing and getting the absolute hell out of the playoff rankings. So now Cincinnati can move up. They're in the same week that they become the first team to get in from a group of 5 or be in the top 4 of the playoff rankings from a group of 5 conference. At the same time, they find out that the biggest perceived threat to Fickell leaving, their coach leaving, and the gravy train stopping, at least for now. And again, I have respect for Cincinnati's program and the coaches they've hired, and I think they would survive, obviously, just fine without Fickell. But you don't want to go through that if you don't have to, right? You also find out that Franklin is staying put at Penn State. Those are 2 major news items to happen in favor of Cincinnati. So congratulations to the Bearcats, man. I mean, it's been fun following this and having more of a vested interest in this because of the new look Big 12 and what is coming down the pipe. And to see things working out the way that they are right now for Cincinnati is just really cool. It's honestly really cool. And if we want to take this back, I mean, think about the last 7 days. It starts with the win over SMU and just blasting SMU the way that Cincinnati did after having some frustrating weeks here where they're not putting up enough style points and taking some crap from the playoff committee, from folks nationally, a lack of respect generally for Cincinnati because of that. They go spank SMU in arguably the biggest game that they play this year. Then they find out they're in the top 4 of the playoff rankings. Then they find out James Franklin staying at Penn State, so you don't have to worry about the biggest threat for your coach to leave. Heck of a week for the Bearcats. Heck of a week. Just need to go out and take care of business against East Carolina today, or this weekend, rather. Sorry, I'm reading the chat here. I'm getting a little distracted. Lannis31, I see Luke isn't leaving because of seniors. I mean, so that I don't think he's leaving if Penn State's not coming open. I don't think Fickell is leaving. And there's another tweet that I need to get to on that front too that came from Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports. But I would never say, Landis, I would stick with I get the promised in major facilities and all that. I understand some of those arguments, but to me, when you start saying he's not going to leave because of the seniors, he's not going to leave because of facilities that have been promised. I mean, that to me starts to sound like things that many a program has said about a coach who's just about to leave. I don't think Fickell is about to leave. I would just stay away from those arguments. I think it's just he has a select few jobs that he really wants to leave for. None of those appear to be open right now. He is about to elevate his status a little bit at Cincinnati by moving conferences and getting to the Big 12, and he's on the precipice of making the playoff at Cincinnati right now. Like, those are the things that matter. It's not the seniors, and I mean, no offense to seniors, but that's never been the thing that is going to keep a coach at a job. It's just not. Like, money will talk, opportunity will talk. If you're going to leave a job, there are going to be seniors and people that you leave behind that are special. That's just going to be the case. If you're a coach, that's what comes with the territory. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Lannis, I see. Response to UCF fans. Sorry, I'm just popping into the chat. So if I took that the wrong way, my apologies. Yes, Sonny to TCU appears to be happening, and we're going to talk about that later on in this chat too, which is also good news in a roundabout way for Matt Campbell, because the Fort Worth Star-Telegram had reported on a couple of occasions that there was at least some level of interest from Campbell in the TCU job there. And Campbell, it probably is still someone to keep an eye on what's going to happen here in this cycle, and what's going to happen with all of these jobs open, because I will say I still do, and I'm honestly exhausted by this point of going through the Campbell stuff over and over again, because I know that I opened up a can of worms with the Iowa State fans that are just unhappy at anybody suggesting that Matt Campbell might leave or poking some holes in his resume, which again, I do think is fair. I think he is a good to very good coach, not an elite coach, which has been evidenced by a team that is 6-5 right now that was supposed to be the best team in school history. But he is a good coach. And now if you're looking at the landscape, he is losing a major senior class here. All these guys that stuck around, it's probably going to take a little bit of time to bridge that gap to what people have pointed out to me is his best recruiting class coming up this year. So the timing would be right. And there are a plethora of open jobs right now that are pretty damn good jobs in college football. And candidates are falling off. You do not have Mel Tucker on the board anymore. You do not have James Franklin on the board anymore. So now we're sitting here with USC. I don't think Campbell would be in the mix at LSU. Take LSU out of there, but you're talking about USC, Florida, Washington, like jobs like that are open right now with a shrinking pool of candidates. If there is a time to look and at least field some calls right now for Campbell, this would be it. And that's why my whole point this whole time, and I can't say it enough. And I know Iowa State fans, if you guys could like spread the word on this, like, first of all, the reports came from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, legitimate journalists, not just me, a guy with a YouTube channel and a microphone, that Campbell did at least listen on some level to TCU. And the fact that he listened to, I know all of you, oh, TCU, that job, why would he leave for that job? I didn't ever think he would leave, but the fact that he was listening to that tells me that there is going to be at least some level of listening, I would imagine, from him this year more so than in years past. And it's because of, to me, the factors that are there internally at Iowa State with what would be leaving now and what jobs are open right now. Because even if you are Campbell or even Fickell, like in this position where you don't want to leave, you have your list of like Midwest jobs that you would really want. There are not many times when jobs like Florida, LSU, USC, Washington are all open in the same year. Maybe Miami, that job may be coming open as well. There are not often times when those jobs are all open in a college football offseason. And I would think like the smart thing, the wise thing to do would be to at least listen there. So that's kind of always been my point. But if you want some further good news on the front of both Campbell and Fickell and what's going on right now, let me pull up my tweet from Dennis Dodd here. Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports tweeted earlier today, hearing that Luke Fickell is staying at Cincinnati, recruits being told such. And to me, just no surprise that would be the case right on the heels of the James Franklin news. Like, we find out that James Franklin inks an extension with Penn State, likely isn't going anywhere. Now, pretty shortly after that, people are being told around Cincinnati. Dennis Dodd certainly is hearing that people are being told around Cincinnati. Recruits are being told that Fickell is staying put and not leaving. The timing on all that really, really syncs up, right? That he would be sticking around there. So that kind of covers the Fickell part with Penn State not opening up. I don't know that Fickell, Michigan State would have done it, and Michigan State was open recently here, right, and made a run at Fickell. Cincinnati fans can probably help me out with that. Has Fickell turned down Michigan State once already? I think that might actually be the case. And the Mel Tucker thing, to me, probably applies more toward Matt Campbell than it does Luke Fickell, because that's the type of job that I would really wonder about for Campbell if it came open. It seems borderline to me as to like whether or not that would – it's in that Midwest footprint. It's in kind of the footprint that he would want to stay in, and they have buku money to throw around. I mean, the money that they're paying Mel Tucker, guy about to sign almost a $100 million extension. And so, yeah, Lannis says, yes, he did. That's why Tucker got the Michigan State job. Boom, there you go. Michigan State's got a lot of money, a ton of resources to throw around. The Big Ten, obviously, they're starting to lap the field along with the SEC financially on everybody else in college football. So there would be a lot of reason, I think, to seriously consider that had it come open, but it's not. Mel Tucker is going to stay put at Michigan State. So the way things are starting to break here, I mean, the big threats, the primetime players to pluck some of these Big 12 coaches are falling off. I see Philip asking there in the chat. And by the way, if you want to donate in the chat, you can do so by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. If you want to support this channel and what I do, plus get your question or comment up to the top of the page and make sure that I see it. Philip asks about Dave Aranda to LSU. Is there an update there? No, but a lot of that has just been that like nobody seems to – LSU has done a great job of keeping the decision under wraps and keeping the whole coaching search under wraps. Nobody really has a good vibe or pulse as to what's happening right now with LSU and that opening. So I don't have anything really to report there, but I think still that's a pretty strong possibility. Now, this is just me going off of what I'm seeing national guys reporting and what national guys are talking about. like I listen to the Yahoo College Football podcast pretty religiously, and that is something they've even mentioned. Like those guys are as plugged in as anybody. That's like Pete Thamel, Pat Forty. Those guys have said over and over again. Dan Wetzel is the other one. I don't know why I was blanking on Dan's name. Sorry, Dan. But they've said over and over again, like LSU's been a tough one to figure out. They really don't have much of an idea right now about what is happening there. So I don't have anything tangible on that with Aranda and Baylor. But again, another program I would stress, if you're a Baylor fan in here, if Aranda does leave, you guys have gone from Art Briles to Matt Rule to Dave Aranda, 3 coaches that have won at either a Big 12 championship game level or close to it. We'll see if Aranda winds up getting there, but there is a decent chance of that going into this weekend at least. So, yeah, there's just a ton happening right now. And again, it just comes back to the old, you know what my narrative always is going to be, that this new Big 12 can be a pretty viable league. There are coaches being rumored to be plucked away all over the place in this new league. Everybody seems to want Matt Campbell. Everybody seems to want Luke Fickell. Everybody wants Dave Aranda. Oh, so this conference that is that bad and that poor and that behind everybody else just has all this coaching talent that everybody wants to take. And now it's starting to look like at least 2 of the 3 would be likelier to stay put than leave right now. Oh, okay. I guess this league actually does have something. I guess this league does actually have a little bit of chutzpah to it, a little bit of teeth to it. Okay, so that is something that I will reiterate here. Let's see, Matt Campbell in regards to Michigan State. Matt Campbell in regards to TCU would be the other thing I would just tack on to this conversation to open up talking about the coaches here. It obviously, I always said it was a long shot, the TCU thing, but again, Fort Star Telegram reported on multiple occasions with multiple different reporters at that same outlet that Campbell had listened on some level to TCU and was involved there. Now everything is moving towards Sonny Dykes. Everything has been moving towards Sonny Dykes. Shout out to Lannis31. I see the donation there. Thank you, Lannis. Much, much appreciated. If you want to be like Lannis, you can click the $ below the chat box. But yeah, TCU, frankly, it is boring to me that Sonny Dykes is going to be the guy. That seems like the boring way to go. That seems like the backup plan. If I were TCU, and it just got really wild and exciting there, where it's like all of a sudden Matt Campbell's being mentioned a little bit. Deion Sanders was mentioned, and that was the one that really got my attention. Like, okay, this could be just a wild search. If TCU is going to open it up and be willing to listen to Deion freaking Sanders for the job right now, like who knows where this thing could go. The fact that it's looking like it's zeroing in on Sonny Dykes, who everybody thought that they would hire in the first place, and to me, it was underwhelming at Cal, even if it was a bad fit, whatever, still just very underwhelming in his career. It doesn't do much for me. Now, I hope for TCU's sake that Sonny Dykes is great, and maybe that will wind up being a really good fit. I don't know, but to me, it is fairly boring, and I would just have some questions about that. And some of this comes back to also the whole Campbell conversation once again. Thank you, Jack. Shout out to the donation that Jack just made there. Comes back to the whole TCU v. Iowa State discussion, where I was trying to point out how I think TCU is a pretty good job, and you could argue is the best job in the new look Big 12. I don't know. That conversation comes down to basically the same sort of deal where we were discussing who is going to be in the best position in the new Big 12 to win. Like, what is the best program in the new Big 12? I think it's the same kind of discussion as what is the best job that's there. But TCU has a case. I mean, they've won 11-plus games 3 times since they joined the Big 12 in 2012. So that's a job where you can win big. They were number 3 in the playoff rankings at one point in time. You can get into the top 4 of the playoff rankings at TCU, and you're right in DFW. You have one of the best recruiting territories in the country right in your backyard in the same metro area that you're located in. I think that's a really good job. And to me, it just feels like Sonny Dykes is selling yourself a bit short. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe the fit was completely off at Cal. Being back in Texas, where obviously Sonny with his dad Spike in Lubbock with Texas Tech, all of those ties, I understand why it could be better and probably will be better. I think just simply because of that, because of what the job is and because of the resources and all of that, than what things were at Cal. But I still, that is underwhelming to me. I would think you could have done better if you're TCU. I'm a little bit disappointed to see that that's the way it's going, because I thought either swing for the fences. Take a run at Billy Napier, maybe if that's the kind of guy you can get. Obviously, it seemed like they were taking somewhat of a run at Campbell. If you can get one of those bigger names, or if you can just get the wild name, and the wild name in Deion Sanders, I would have definitely been here for checking out that. But hey, we'll see. And I've got a little bit more on Sonny Dykes, but I'm going to get to some donations here. James, thank you, James, for not only the donation, but the awesome sticker that comes along with it to keep it up. Love that little working out guy. Manny UCF, shout out to Manny UCF. Thank you for the donation and hanging out here. UCF also, by the way, would be in that conversation to be for best potential job and school best position to win and be the best in the new look Big 12. They were. I think I said right when we did that conversation initially here on this chat that I felt like UCF would be that school just because of the unbelievable growth potential that they have there. T. Luft, Iowa State is building a restaurant hotel complex at the stadium. Lots of investment to have a top program. Yes, and I feel like anything I say at this point to Iowa State fans will just be in one ear out the other. I think there is some level of that. Iowa State has a big enrollment. Clearly, they're going to try and do whatever they can to keep Campbell around. I was very impressed by it. They stepped up financially and paid a lot, not just for Campbell, but for his assistants with an extension last year. They're definitely doing a solid job resource-wise. I don't know what like a restaurant hotel complex at the stadium really ultimately does, for you that much. I also will just tell you, T. Luft, and this is I've covered the Big 12 for 10 years. I've been to every stadium in the league 3 or 4 times. I mean, Iowa State has the worst press box of any place in the league. There's still a lot of investments that would need to be made there. For instance, K-State has kind of blows Iowa State out of the water facility-wise and that's because of upwards of $150 to $200 million that have been pumped into football facilities in the last 10 years. But I just think there's a lot of work that needs to happen there. Iowa State's never won more than 9 games in a season. I just think there are some real limitations there that Campbell is running into, and I will not back off of that point until proven otherwise. But it obviously is a place that Campbell is really comfortable with right now. And in some ways, that's helping Iowa State out because Campbell's not jumping up to that level where he's winning 11 games a year and then would be a much hotter candidate at some of the biggest jobs. So, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade. He's done a great job, obviously, at Iowa State. I do think he is a good to very good coach. He just, to me, gets a little bit overrated. And this year, I think some of the national reaction is starting to come around to that when you had a team this hyped that is now 6-5 going into the last week of the regular season. Thank you to Glenn. Shout out to Glenn for the donation. Glenn chipping in there. I'm not laughing at you, Glenn. I appreciate sincerely your support and for being here. I'm laughing at Philip who says, you take primetime at KSU. I would take it from the the media standpoint of it. If I were still on the beat and covering the team day to day, like on a daily basis, that would be that would definitely be something I would be here for and would be very entertaining. I don't know about just being now a fan. And look, I guess you could say I still cover K-State, but with the role being a little bit different, I don't know about that, man. I don't know. Could Prime pull some players to K-State? That would be interesting to see if he would be able to pull some players to Manhattan, Kansas. That would be pretty tough. Wolf 58. Now every Cyclone is coming after you on Twitter. Man, that's been happening. That's been happening for like 3 weeks. That has been happening. It's just the other part that's been funny about that to me is like I've been more tame with Iowa State in the last 6 months than I have been over the last 2 or 3 years. It's just I guess my star has risen to the point now where they're paying attention. Nobody paid attention before. I was just a lowly K-State guy, but you hit that come up and everybody pays more attention to what it is that you're saying. So interesting enough there. But look, I think Iowa State will win this weekend. They'll finish up 7-5, and they'll continue to be in a much better spot than where they were when Campbell took over the program. And Campbell's probably going to stay put. I mean, the way the winds are all turning right now, it looks like Campbell is likely, I would say more likely to stay put at Iowa State than leave somewhere else. Although, again, I will be very interested to see what happens at the end of the regular season if he does pop up. Like, does Florida have interest there? I don't know. That just doesn't seem at this point, quite sexy enough for Florida, or exactly what they're looking for, where they want somebody that's going to be a stud recruiter. Campbell clearly can recruit. He's doing a good job at Iowa State, but it's not like a name that's going to jump off the page as a guy who has top 10 recruiting classes or something like that to appease Florida fans right now with the state that they're in. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see, but the winds seem to be blowing toward Fickell and Campbell staying put, which would be very good news for the Big 12. Okay, I promised you more on Sonny Dykes. So Sonny Dykes there have been multiple reports. The Athletic said today that their sources are indicating that the coaching search is focused heavily on Sonny Dykes right now. He's the leading candidate at TCU. 24/7 Sports earlier this week had put out the report that Sonny Dykes was the leading candidate and who TCU was really closing in on. So we've had a couple of different sources, and everybody seems to be saying that right now, that that's the way it's going. The other thing that really seems to slam dunk that point home today is that SMU lost 5 commitments today. 5 commitments today. Okay, so look, college football is crazy, and guys decommit and leave all the time, and guys hit the portal all the time. Like, a lot of this stuff happens quite frequently right now, and more so. And you have to kind of change your expectations and change your thoughts on when these things do happen now, because it's just such a different world. But you still don't typically see 5 decommitments happening in that short a period of time. So what's the logical conclusion there? Well, that all these kids just got told that Sonny Dykes is not going to be the head coach at SMU next year, right? That would be the logical thought. And another thing that is being linked to this is that all 5 are recruited by Rashad Samples, who is he's the best recruiter on SMU's staff. He's killed it in the DFW area, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So the other thing I would say is, all right, if those guys all had him kind of as the lead recruiter, the lead dog there, and now they're all decommitting, that may be good news for TCU on the front of supporting Sonny Dykes with him bringing his hotshot recruiter in Rashad Samples, because he's somebody also that had been chased after by a number of different Power 5 programs that really wanted him because of those Dallas-Fort Worth ties and how good of a job he was doing there. So, hey, if TCU winds up with him, that makes Sonny Dykes sure seem a lot better, because 3 of these kids were 4-star prospects. I should have mentioned that too. I mean, we're talking about SMU recruiting to SMU. 3 of those guys are 4-star prospects. So these are not just like average run-of-the-mill players. These are good players that were going to be going to SMU. So that's a tough blow for SMU, man. I feel bad for them on that front if that much talent really is going to be moving if and when they lose Sonny Dykes. But yeah, it seems like everything is heavily pushing toward Dykes is going to be the guy at TCU. So underwhelming to me, but hey, it is what it is. Neilio, I see Neilio hopping in there. What's up, Neilio? Shout out to you. John, do you make anything of former Tech head coach Matt Wells being around the K-State program recently, maybe in addition to the 22 coaching staff? I have seen those rumors. I've heard a little bit of that. I think I'm not saying it's nothing, but I'm not saying it's anything significant right now. A part of that is Matt Wells and Chris Kleiman have been public about their friendship for a while. Those guys are pretty close. In fact, Chris Kleiman told me back at Big 12 Media Days in Dallas in July earlier this year that Matt Wells was actually his best friend in the coaching business, or maybe it was best Power 5 friend. I can't remember if I differentiated, like if FCS, obviously where he came from, if it was different there. But the point being, they're close, they're good friends. And I think worst case scenario, if you just have the guy hang out and pick his brain on what to do about your remaining Big 12 games, then that seems to be a smart way to go about it, right? I mean, you can say what you will about Wells, but he is a former Big 12 head coach, and I definitely respect his acumen as a coordinator, position coach, analyst, whatever it might be that you would be thinking there, Neilio, for 2022. So not nothing. I haven't heard anything, though, that would indicate to me that like something like that is imminent, something like that is very likely to happen. Maybe just something to keep your eye on as the offseason rolls along. I don't think K-State's going to have a coordinator job opening, for instance. So I don't know that it's going to be anything like that. And I don't know if Wells would take a position like that. I don't know if he wants a year off to, you're off. A year to just be an analyst somewhere before kind of recalibrating and seeing what's out there. I wouldn't be against it. Because again, he's not coming in to be the head coach. So regardless of what you think of him being as a head coach, he's not coming in to be a head coach there. Okay, let's get to the playoff. Because the new Big 12 has 4 of the top 13 in the college football playoff rankings, which is pretty astounding. I mean, you think about how much crap this league took from July through September, October. Then it started to fall off a little bit because everybody was actually paying attention to the season that was happening. But just months of relentless narratives, storylines, stories in The Athletic about TV numbers, the Heather Dinich stuff about the AAC may actually raid the Big 12. All of that. And we sit here at the end of the year, and from BYU at 13 on up, there are 4 teams included from the new look league. Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati obviously being the other 3. And a 5th team, as Lannis points out, in the top 25 with Houston, who frankly should be higher after the 10-game winning streak that they put together. Only 1 second half collapse against Texas Tech away from being undefeated themselves. Yes, Houston deserves better, and they are also in that top 25. It's a great look. It's a great look for the league. And the Pac-12 and the ACC having only a combined 1 in that top 13 group also accentuates the point here. Never mind the fact that I tried to tweet that fact like 3 times on Twitter yesterday, and I kept screwing up the numbers. First I had it 3-1, then I had it 4-0. I just gave up after a while. I was like, look, it's not my day on Twitter. I had to take a day off almost, so to speak. But man, what an accomplishment for this league. What an accomplishment for this league. And of course, this is how it always goes. Narratives happen. People get out and they're really loud and boastful when or boisterous when that's the thing that is really creating a lot of the pull, which at the time it was. That was what people cared about. That's why this YouTube channel blew up. Everybody cared about conference realignment. Well, then faded into the season. And now here at the end of the year, it's not like a popular thing. It's not something that would drive clicks. It's not something that would drive interest to talk about how the Big 12 is doing, the new look league is doing compared to the Pac-12 and the ACC. So that narrative never really gets corrected. That narrative never really gets an update. And it's why people like me were screaming, and us, everybody that's here in this channel, we were sitting here screaming about this way back when, because at some point somebody has to combat these narratives that get out of control, and then nobody comes back around to fix them or correct them when they turn out to be incorrect. And I think, look, to me, we've chronicled it all year. The Pac-12 has been closer to the Mountain West in terms of average team ranking than the Big 12, according to the computer rankings all year. You have that data. Now we have this data from the playoff committee, which is much more the opposite of the computers, where it's like eye test and even those people that go through the eye test and all that stuff, like, they're sitting here saying, like, yeah, this new league actually looks pretty damn good. And now, if we know that Cincy is capable of getting into the top 4 of the playoff rankings, and all they have to do is just take care of business, and they should be in the playoff. Well, we now know that it's possible for Cincy to get there as a member of a Group of 5 conference. And no matter what you think of where the Big 12's place is going to be in the new college football world, once everybody gets here, it's a step above where Cincinnati's been now. So we know that it's capable for that team to get into the playoff. That's even pre-expansion. Okay, then we're going to get playoff expansion, where you will definitely have at least 1 team in there. We're seeing a lot of respect for Oklahoma State, a lot of respect for Baylor, a lot of respect for BYU this year. BYU has been great each of the last 2 years. There's just so much momentum flowing right now for this conference. And again, tacking on with the coaching discussion from earlier, better chance now, it would appear, than a couple of weeks ago that Campbell and Fickell are going to stay put at Cincinnati and Iowa State, which also helps strengthen the league. So I just don't want that accomplishment to get swept under the rug or people to forget about it. And it may change. I mean, we'll see what happens with Oklahoma State and Baylor this weekend. It could change pretty quickly and things fall back down a little bit. But for now, I mean, we only have 1 week left, right? We only have 1 week left of the regular season, and the Big 12 is in a prime position and just showing its power much more so than the Pac-12 and the ACC. The other part of it right now, this snapshot in time, is that Oregon not only lost, but they got absolutely blasted. And so it just does not reflect well on them and their strength much at all right now. So the only 1 team that's there, yes, they kind of rode the coattails of that Ohio State win throughout much of the year to get more respect than they deserved. Now all that shine's completely come off of them. And people are starting to give Oklahoma State their shine, give Cincinnati some of that shine after the win over SMU. So at this moment in time, it feels pretty good to be a fan of the new Big 12. And there's even, I would tell you, a realistic playoff scenario that includes two teams from the new look Big 12. And that may be the point. Like, that would have to be the time, right, that the narrative would get some level of change from the top down. And there would be some level of contrition, perhaps, from some of those that really danced on the grave of the Big 12 back in July. If Oklahoma State and Cincinnati are both in the playoff at the end of the year, there would have to be some turning around on that, right? I think that would hit home enough. That would be a big enough deal that some people would. And here's how it would happen. Here's what you need to happen. So Oklahoma State is sitting there at 7. The Cincinnati part of this is easy, right? Cincinnati is at number 4. They've got a game against East Carolina. They're going to go line up against Houston in the AAC championship game. Win those 2 games, you should be in. That should not really be a question. Then on top of that, you need Georgia to beat Alabama, which seems like a likely outcome, not just because Georgia has been so dominant, but because Alabama has also, I mean, this to me is an equal part of it, has also farted around with average to bad teams. I mean, they did that with LSU. They did that with Florida, 2 objectively bad teams this year. They also just recently against a decent Arkansas team, but in Tuscaloosa, decent Arkansas team, they're hanging around with a chance to tie the game in the 4th quarter. So we've just seen it time and time again this year from Bama. They're not the quintessential Bama team. They are not on the level that Georgia appears to be at this year. Albeit, I will admit, Georgia has not. The best Georgia win right now is Clemson, who's just barely in the rankings, right? So they haven't been tested by a team quite like Alabama, but I still think there is a sizable gap between those two. So you need Georgia to beat Bama. You need Ohio State to beat Michigan. That seems fairly obvious to me that it's going to happen. I know the spread is 8. I don't know. I would have it higher. I think Ohio State's winning that game by multiple scores. 2 very, very realistic things to start off. Then you just need Oklahoma State to beat Oklahoma and Baylor. And that to me is the most difficult part of all of this by far. We know the Bedlam history. Mike Gundy has struggled mightily against his in-state rival. He's only beaten them twice, right? Maybe an Oklahoma State fan can hop in there and give me the answer on that. Gundy is what? He's like 2-13 is the record against Oklahoma. I should have looked that up before I popped on here for the live show tonight. But so that is a tough hill to climb for Gundy to beat Oklahoma. And then you'd have to turn around. And if that happened, assuming that Baylor beats Texas Tech this weekend, it would be Baylor in the title game. Wins over Oklahoma and Baylor back-to-back. You're talking about 2 top 10 wins in consecutive weeks, because if Baylor were to make the title game, they would have beaten Tech, and they would still be a top 10 team in the playoff rankings. Obviously, Oklahoma is a top 10 team right now. Back-to-back top 10 wins for Oklahoma State. That would give them a ton of juice, and that's why the last part of this scenario here is that Oklahoma State would have to jump Notre Dame. But that, to me, would be pretty easy. I mean, it would be a travesty at that point if the playoff committee stuck with Notre Dame ahead of Oklahoma State after back-to-back top 10 wins there, when Notre Dame is just cruising to the finish line without much in the way of substance on their schedule. I don't think this is that outrageous of a scenario for this to all play out. Georgia beats Bama, Ohio State beats Michigan, Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma and Baylor, and bam. And Cincinnati obviously has to win their 2 games. But that's what it would take to get Cincinnati and Oklahoma State into the playoff along with Georgia and Ohio State. Don't think that's crazy. Don't think that is totally crazy. And that is just really exciting for the Big 12 that scenario is still out here this late into the season. So new Big 12 fans, there are your rooting interests. You need to root for Georgia. You need to root for Ohio State. You need to root for Oklahoma State. You need to root for Cincinnati. And if enough goes well there, you very well could have that scenario. And I see Richard, but John, that is what is going to happen just because it is Notre Dame. I completely, Richard, understand the skepticism. Totally understand the skepticism and the fear there in that happening. But at least we have seen the committee come around to, like, Cincinnati, putting them in the top 4. Like, I thought that was something we would never see. I thought that the committee would always just thumb their nose too much at a team like Cincinnati, at a team from the group of 5, and They have at least grinned and bared it enough to do that. So I think it would be within the realm of possibility they would do the same thing with Oklahoma State. They seem to, another thing here, they seem to have a ton of respect for Baylor. And so if it's Baylor at 10-2 in the Big 12 title game, probably ranked like number 8, number 9 in the playoff rankings, I think that still would carry a lot of weight. And beating Oklahoma, committee doesn't respect them as much this year, but that still is a top 10 win. Oklahoma State does those two things back to back. I want to believe that they would jump Oklahoma State over Notre Dame. Want to believe that because Notre Dame has just been so blah this year. I mean, credit to them. They're doing it without much of a quarterback. And Brian Kelly, I think, is a really good coach, and it's been a great coaching job this year to get to where they're at. But they've just been taking care of average teams most of the year and just kind of taking care of business. So yeah, that's kind of where I feel like things are at as far as the playoff is concerned. But the Big 12, the new look Big 12, creating a lot of really positive publicity with that, or at least I'm trying to get them some publicity. And if it played out that way in the playoff, I think there would be some legitimate pub, obviously, for that if Cincy and Oklahoma State were both to go. So here are the Big 12 title game scenarios. Yeah, I'm laughing at Wolf 58. Oh God, nobody wants to see Notre Dame in the playoff anymore. Yeah, facts. Nobody does want to see that in the playoff anymore. We know how that goes. We've seen enough of that. Here are the Big 12 title game scenarios. Oklahoma State's already in, so you don't need to worry about that. The Cowboys will be playing for a Big 12 championship. If Oklahoma wins Bedlam, the Big 12 title game will be Bedlam Part 2. So OU wins. We're going to get OU Oklahoma State once again for the Big 12 championship. And at that point, I would tell you the Big 12's playoff chances are pretty much dead. If Oklahoma can beat Oklahoma State back-to-back, maybe we should open the conversation a little bit more to that. But they just have further to go. They're behind a couple of 2-loss teams already right now. That doesn't seem to me as plausible. I think they might need Notre Dame to lose. Ironically, in that scenario, that Oklahoma State has the better shot here is the lesser brand to Oklahoma to jump Notre Dame, but I think that would probably be the reality. If Oklahoma loses Bedlam and Baylor loses to Texas Tech, we would get Bedlam Part 2. So it is possible for Oklahoma State to beat Oklahoma and then have to play them again. That would require Baylor losing to Texas Tech. But if Oklahoma loses Bedlam and Baylor beats Texas Tech, the Big 12 title game will be Oklahoma State against Baylor. So that is, if the two favorites win, that's the scenario we would get in the Big 12 championship game in Arlington, is that you would get Oklahoma State and Baylor. So we'll see. I can't tell you how fascinated I am by that game and watching what happens with Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, because everything about, like in a vacuum, everything about this year and the teams that are out there this year and what these teams are right now would tell you that Oklahoma State should be the favorite. Oklahoma State should win this game. Caleb Williams has been so up or down, especially when he goes on the road. Think of the Kansas performance, right? Like away from home, Caleb Williams has been very, very hot and cold. And going into that environment at night, Boone Pickens Stadium, with all the extra charged up factor that's going to be there because Oklahoma's leaving the conference. Boy, and I think Oklahoma State is just a better team. They've just been so much more consistent. They've been so much more consistent. You know what you're going to get basically out of them every single week, and they seem to be getting stronger here at the end of the year. Oklahoma, way more like this, seemingly getting worse here toward the end of the season. Everything about that would tell me Oklahoma State, but there is the history factor. And Gundy has just not been able to solve Oklahoma, even when he's had better teams. Gundy has just really struggled, and so it's hard for me to feel comfortable making that kind of a pick. Now, I have not made my official picks for the week. I'll probably record those tomorrow and get those to you on Friday here on the channel. So I don't know where I'm going on that side of things, but we'll see. And Rob points out in the chat another thing that scares me. He says Spencer Sanders is due for a 5 INT game. I don't know if it would be that bad, but Spencer Sanders always makes me a little bit nervous. If the game is going to be put really on his shoulders, that makes me nervous. But it may not have to be, because Oklahoma's offense has certainly been far from what we expect out of a typical Lincoln Riley offense. And Oklahoma State's defense has been the best that we've seen in college football outside of Georgia in years, basically. In the Big 12, it's certainly the best defense we've seen in years. Max Olson from The Athletic had all the stats about how it's the best defense since Ndamukong Suh's Nebraska team in 2009 in the Big 12. So it may not have to come down to Spencer Sanders. And that's the thing that would really comfort me more in thinking about this game. So that storyline, and then there's one more storyline as I'm about to hop off here, but I'm going to give you one more storyline that I think is really fascinating and fun heading into the final weekend of the Big 12 regular season. And thank you, Ferris, for the donation. If you want to be like Ferris and donate here in the last 5 minutes or so, you can click the $ below the chat box, the $ below where it says say something. And one, support the channel. Two, make sure your question or comment gets to the top so I see it before I hop out here. The other storyline at play where we need to track scenarios is our friends down at Austin, the University of Texas, could finish last in the Big 12 this year. It is possible that Oklahoma finishes, or Texas rather, finishes last in the Big 12. And what that takes is a K-State win in Austin over Texas, which is not a given. Vegas doesn't think so, as Texas has been a slight favorite most of the week. So not a given. The K-State wins that game, but it's kind of a toss-up, pick-em sort of a game. Some of the issue here is that Skylar Thompson is injured. I don't think he's going to play. Got hurt in the fourth quarter of the Baylor game, hoping he'll be back for the bowl game. I think that's likely. But Ramiro, I see your question. Don't expect Skylar Thompson to play. You're going to see Will Howard at quarterback, which could play right into Texas or K-State's hands because Texas can't stop the run, and you could actually run Will Howard at quarterback all day, whereas Skylar, you couldn't do that because of the injury. So that could be an advantage there in a weird way for K-State. But not a gimme, but Texas, if they really have just cashed it in on this season, if they continue to be the mess that they've been, it's a game K-State probably should win. The other thing you need to have happen is Kansas beating West Virginia. They're a 15.5-point underdog, but they almost beat TCU. They just beat Texas. They almost beat Oklahoma earlier this year. Leipold's doing a really good job. It's a team playing with some confidence right now. At games in Lawrence, like West Virginia has a lot to play for with bowl eligibility, so I would expect a really focused Mountaineer squad, but it's not crazy anymore to suggest that that is a scenario that could happen. And that's why we're here. And would nobody else here, would everybody here, like nothing more than to see Texas finish last in the league on the heels of announcing that they're leaving for the SEC. We're too good for you guys. See you later. Here comes a big, fat last place finish in this league that you think you're so much better than Texas. It would be amazing. It would be amazing if that were to happen. So here's to hoping. Here's to hoping. We need you, Kansas. We need you, Kansas. The state of Kansas, in fact, all of you guys in here, the state of Kansas holds the fate of Texas finishing last in the Big 12 in its hands. Great power, great responsibility. Ad astra per astra. The state of Kansas. Let's go, baby. Let's have some fun with it this Saturday. Whereas Gary says, don't you think Jaron Lewis will start? No. Will Howard will start. Chris Kleiman clarified that in the press conference earlier this week. It would be Will Howard. It's going to burn a red shirt, but to me, they should have burned the red shirt and played him against Baylor late in the game instead of letting Jaron Lewis come in to throw one straight to a Baylor jersey to end the game. But I digress. I've ranted plenty about that. You can find my thoughts on that on Twitter. Anyway, I see Echo Jar. There's no way I'm picking Texas to win. They've clearly folded for the season. Go get them, K-State. We will try. We will certainly try Friday at 11 a.m. in Austin. Hope the Cats can get it done for everybody here. I think that's going to about wrap it up for me. Everybody go enjoy your families. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Sincerely, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the week. I hope everybody has the rest of the week of work off like I do. Living this corporate life now. So that is pretty nice. I hope you get to watch tons of football, enjoy friends, family, food, all that good stuff. And I will talk to you guys soon. I'm hoping, like I said, to get my picks video shot tomorrow. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. So you'll at least have a picks video later on this week. And then you know the deal. Live chat on Sunday. We'll keep it moving. Appreciate all you guys. Ron, Shorts All Year, Larry, Fabio, Lannis, everybody in the chat. Thank you for hanging out here tonight. Tell your friends about the channel. Spread the word. Follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz. Tell your friends about the channel that you think might enjoy it. Get them involved here, and let's keep making this thing bigger and better. Take care and talk to you soon.